Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of the Cleveland International Film Festival, CIFF Speaks, sponsored by Wayside Furniture. I'm Dee Perry, and I'm joined by my producer and co-host, Aaron Spears. Aaron, you and I have been watching a handful of films to prepare for conversations with filmmakers who are part of CIFF 46. Now, imagine if you had to pre-screen hundreds or even thousands of films to get ready.
Oh, you're speaking my language, Dee. That sounds like a good time. And joining us today are four members of the CIFF staff who have the enviable task of sampling a global smorgasbord of film so that they can bring the tastiest morsels of what they've been watching to the Cleveland International Film Festival. Welcome to CIFF's Artistic Director, Mallory Martin, and features programmers Neha Aziz, Ivonne Cotorruelo, and Brett Reiter.
So I want to start, Mallory, with the idea of how this team was put together. I mean, when you were looking for programmers, what was the search process and what kinds of qualities and credentials were you looking for?
That is a really great question, Dee. So the history of the programming team at CIFF has always been, especially for features, has been very small. And this is the largest programming team that we've had for features, I believe, in the history of CIFF. So that was something that I knew I wanted to do over a year ago, not only because I needed help desperately, but also because it was really important for all of us to start building, especially from the beginning, a programming team that includes other voices, right? So a collaborative team that I was able to talk with about films and also to bring different perspectives and lived experiences and viewpoints to the mix. And I think that that's where it all starts, right? With the film festival is at the programming point in terms of choosing which films to be in the festival. So I will say that I don't even know. I'm trying to remember exactly how I went about first, and maybe the programmers remember better. I don't know if I put out an application or not. I think a lot of this was word of mouth from other programmers and other people I knew in the industry.
So were they calling you to say, is there a job or no?
No, that was me. Well, I mean, okay. We always get inquiries about, we do always get inquiries about programming, you know, that it's sort of the glamorous seeming part of the job of the festival, I will say. And so I've always kept a running list. But anyway, so I had started talking to other people I knew within the industry, if they knew of other programmers who were looking for work. But we were also doing this during the pandemic, right? So I knew everything was going to have to be remote. It was sort of bittersweet in that way, in that we could go outside of our local community to search for other professional experienced programmers. And that's how it happened. So Neha Aziz came to me through another programmer that I know as a recommendation. And that was a pretty quick hire. Neha and I had one conversation. I was like, you're in. And plus Neha, she comes from a great background too, having worked at South by before, but also with the Austin Asian American Film Festival, which she can talk about later. I knew that she'd bring a good eye for Asian films in particular too, and know about some that I wasn't aware of. Likewise with Ivonne. And Ivonne has worked at a number of festivals in the past. I'll let her talk about that more, but she also has a strong background in Latin American film. And that was something that I knew in the past years, I particularly did not have as good of an eye on as I wanted. So I was really looking to her for that. And I have to say too, I've just loved learning each of the programmers' personalities and their tastes as well. And I think that they are, you know, for me, I start to get sort of stuck in something after a while of doing it. And so it's really great to just bring other voices to the mix. And Brett Reiter, actually, we had a phone conversation last year about his film Poser that he produced, which is in CIFF this year. And that was one of those calls. I'll let Brett talk about it a little bit more too. But so in crunch time, I usually don't take personal calls with filmmakers because I'm busy. And I would love to have the time to do that all the time, but I don't. But for some reason, Brett and I did talk on the phone, and I feel like our first conversation, we talked for like 20 minutes about his film, but then we started to talk about programming in general. I knew he was interested. Brett's also from the Cleveland area originally and lives in Columbus now. So for me, it's always good to have that sort of Midwest voice in programming too, and to know about stories that are important to people in Ohio. So it's a sort of a large nutshell, if you will, in terms of how that happened. But really, it was conversations that I had with each of them over Zoom to see if they would sort of mesh well with programming that we've done in the past, but also bring something new. And that's how we ended up with this team.
Very cool.
Well, Neha, let's start with you, based out of Austin. Mallory mentioned some South by Southwest work you've done. Is that where you got interested in film programming, or was there another entry point for you?
Yes and no. So I've always just loved film. And when I was younger, I would read the film reviews every Friday at my local hometown paper, which was the Arlington Star-Telegram. And not like, not the New York Times or anything,
right.
But that's kind of where it started. And a lot of my interest has always been, or it started out like on the criticism and analysis side. And I went to UT Austin and I got a journalism degree and then had a minor in film. So I took a lot of what does this mean type of classes when talking about different types of film. And because I wanted to be a film critic, and I did do that for like a little bit of time at a local newspaper here. But then it kind of came to a point where I wanted to start writing my own films instead of talking about other people's. And so I kind of went back to UT. I wanted to go to grad school, but I don't have any money. I'm still paying off my loans from undergrad. And I only needed 2 or 3 classes to finish to get a film degree because I had taken so many film classes as a minor. And so then I went back, and that's kind of when I took more production classes and screenwriting classes. And I had worked in retail for so long because I wasn't making money as a journalist or enough to support myself. And then, and I had been to festivals here. I interned at Austin Film Festival. I had volunteered at Sundance for 4 years. So it's I always loved being in that festival space. And I did work at South by Southwest, but I was a member of the communications team from 2017 to 2020. I did all the social media blogs, announcements for the film festival. And I did watch films when I was there, but I wasn't involved in their programming. It was just kind of I want to watch them, so I'm going to. So that was really fun. So Austin definitely played a big part because, growing up in Arlington, there's not really a film scene here like there is here. We have Slacker, we have, all of Richard Linklater stuff. There's a lot of great indie film that's filmed here. There's a great community here. And we have so many different festivals here, which is awesome. So to answer your question, yes, I think it really grew here, but I don't think it started here. Yeah.
What have been some programming highlights for you since you've been in the film programming world?
Well, I think really for Cleveland, because I work at Austin Asian American Film Festival, and that was my first taste, and that's been amazing. I started during the pandemic there, so it'll be really fun to have an in-person festival for the first time for me this year. And that's been awesome. But it is very, it's Asian cinema and AAPI cinema. So it was really nice to get to do something like Cleveland where it's more well-rounded and all sorts of different types of storytelling and films from all different types of countries. So that's been really fun because when I was at South by, and if I watched films, it was more so stuff I wanted to watch and just because I was watching it for fun and not necessarily something that I was looking at for any kind of specific purpose. So that it was really nice. And I do think it really developed my skills. So I think that's definitely been a highlight, being in that programming space.
Nice.
Great. And Ivonne, as Mallory mentioned, New York City is your home base and also the base for a number of renowned film festivals. Now, you were involved in film production before you began work as a programmer. So I'm curious what got you interested in making films?
Thank you for that question. It is great. I should say I live in New York, but I'm Cuban. So I was born and raised in Havana. I'm living in a country like that. Cinema was the only thing that I have to escape, that kind of reality since I was a kid. So I was a film lover since I was a child. And that love for film pays me very well because I started producing films when I got 21 years old, Wow. I'm a Berlinale Talent Campus alumnus, a Tribeca alumnus. So, and at the end, I was so fortunate because my films landed in great festivals such as Toronto, Rotterdam, Biarritz, Toulouse, So going with the festival with my films, I realized since when I was still working as a producer that I was very interested in doing more. And that's the way that I get close to programming, because when you are a producer, you spend at least 3-4 years on a single film. Sometimes you handle 2 films at a time, but it's not easy because production is very hard, and that was the way that made me realize that part of my mission, is empowering filmmakers. And how can I do that, if I still working so long with a single film? So that's the way that I took, the change in my career, and I started working in my new path. When I came to the United States, that was very hard in the beginning because I didn't understand my name. That was a huge challenge. And I started working with some festivals, such as Doc NYC, Tide, and a festival in the Caribbean, which is called Trinidad and Tobago, because I want to discover new filmmakers from the region and try to, to bring those filmmakers here to America and try to make, a both sides road in a kind of way. Yeah. And the same with Latin American films, which I've been known for so long. I am trying to do the same kind of collaboration. Recently I just came back from Cartagena, where I met a filmmaker, whose film we are programming here at Cleveland. And I was so fortunate. I took a video because I want to show it in the presentation, So I should say that's my goal, trying to open more the space, to have more films, more filmmakers. And I've been following Cleveland for so long, Mallory knows. And, I got so fortunate to working with this team. And I think we composed a very special program this year that balance form and content, many stories that I think the program this year is just great.
Excellent. And I'm curious, you mentioned a bunch of large and prestigious festivals, including Cleveland, but I'm curious if you can point to one or an experience that made you say, yes, I'm in the right place at the right time. This is so exciting.
Okay, so I'm gonna use Miami Film Festival because I live in Miami for a couple of years, So I start collaborating in the programming committee with the festival, and I still taking care of some Q&As when the festival is going, And that was the place when we have those discussions, and we are trying to. It's really hard to whittle down the films when we are making the final lineup. So at that point, that was when I realized that. Okay, that's what I want to do for, So that was the moment when I decided I want to change the path. So I still receiving a lot of projects because I was I want to say like a successful producer. But at that point, I realized, I can bring more diversity, more opportunities for filmmakers. So at that point, I say, okay, I want to change right here. And yeah. I took the challenge. It's not easy, but
yeah, right. We're glad you did.
So then, Brett, you being, I guess I feel like we're just slowly moving closer geographically to Cleveland now. So you're from Chardon originally, but currently in Columbus. What was your familiarity with the Cleveland International Film Festival before joining the programming team?
I have to come clean, and I hate that this is how I'm entering the podcast, but I have never once been to the Cleveland International Film Festival. So there's that out of the way. However, I think growing up in Chardon, I think maybe my idea of film festivals was either Sundance or Cannes or just these larger operations. I didn't realize that there was such a robust network of regional festivals like Cleveland is. But I have a very Cleveland-centric answer for why I got into this. It's actually the Cedar Lee Theater in Cleveland Heights was kind of my first entry into seeing a film community, a like-minded group of folks that dug independent cinema, that got the art house stuff. So that was kind of my first interaction with Cleveland film, I guess. So when I went to college and after that, then yes, of course, I knew about Cleveland and CIFF, but yes, I've never been. So I feel like a poser, but here we are.
Good product placement there.
Thank you.
But I like the Cedar Lee connection because it's actually where the film festival started back in the 70s. So sort of by osmosis, you're there. Mm-hmm. What got you to the programming?
That was a little more roundabout. So my company had made Poser in 2019, and then from then have gone on a festival run with it, and going to certain festivals, I found that there was a part of the industry and part of filmmaking that I really enjoyed, the sort of what Yvonne said about supporting and platforming filmmakers and raising voices. I think that film festivals are a really important part of that. So one in particular, it was the Sidewalk Film Festival in Birmingham, Alabama. And I had the lucky chance of meeting a programmer for the Big Sky documentary festival there. And I just kind of asked, like, do you ever need screening help? Do you need screeners? Do you need people to help? And he said, yes. And so last fall, I joined the Big Sky Doc Festival screening team and had to watch 100 doc features. And that was grueling, but I think I really found a love for it through that, just how many films and filmmakers and stories there are in the world. And I think that festivals specifically can be a place to platform those outside of distribution or theaters or just going straight to VOD. Like, I think festivals are so special. And I just think even Mallory brought it up earlier, our call was really me asking, do you also need screening help? And then we just talked about programming and now here I am. So I think it was organic through my career up until this point, but I think the past few months have really awoken a new love for me.
And Mallory, you're the only member of the Futures programming team that is based in Cleveland. So walk us through how the work of pre-screening the films for CIFF 46 got done in this sort of spread out universe of the programmers.
So one point of clarification, there is another member of our team that joined within the last couple of years, and that's Deidre McPherson. She's our special programming manager who is based in Cleveland. She specifically focuses on our Groundbreaker and Dreamcatcher programs though. But she did help, that was new this year. She helped curate those as well. But she's also very busy lady. So she's doing a lot of things right now in Cleveland, but she'll be at the festival as well, and specifically doing Q&As for films within those programs. So we did have some Cleveland representation there too. So like I said, the last couple of years have all been remote work, even for CIFF full-timers for the most part. We've really been working at home. This is like the last couple of months have been the first time that we've all been back in the office together. So we were somewhat used to doing remote work anyways at that point. And to be totally honest, I mean, even pre-pandemic time, a lot of my time was spent at home watching films in the summer and fall for the festival. So that part was felt kind of normal for me. But it was really, I will say it was challenging to work with a group that we were all new with each other. And some of them, like we said, are new to larger festival programming as a general, ones like CIFF that are kind of across the board in terms of programming. But it was really important for me this first year to make sure that we all sort of watched a collection of films so that we were able to see, one, what gets submitted to CIFF, two, for them to also get an idea of the kind of films that I like to program for Cleveland and what I think does well with our audience, and three, for me to get an idea of what films are interesting to them. I told them this a couple months ago, I think, but my one regret, I think, in this first year that I hope to remedy going forward in the future is that I really do wish that we had more time to be more collaborative. And we met once a week, pretty much starting since I think November or December, to talk about the process. But in the first year, there's so much just talking about CIFF and how we work that takes up a lot of time, that I'm really looking forward to having more time and specifically building in more time with everyone to have conversations where we can sit down and talk about the movies, because that's what we love doing the most with each other, I think. And we haven't had a whole lot of time to do that yet, but they're going to be here in person soon. So we'll have time during the festival to do that as well. And then, build this first year, building the groundwork of what we needed for a features programming team. And now we can build that into something really special, I think. So to answer your question, though, in terms of the actual process, submissions opened in June for CIFF. We had almost 1,000 feature submissions. So it was a lot. Plus I don't even know, I should have done the math to see collectively how many festivals we all attended this year. Most of it was virtual. For me, I can say all of my festivals this last year were virtual still. Ivonne and Neha got to go to a couple in person, and Brett was still on the festival circuit with Poser a little bit too. So they were able to do that. But I think, things are going to change within this next year. I'm really excited to go to in-person festivals myself again, and also be able to bring our other programmers along for that. So yeah, we were just watching a ridiculous amount of movies still this year. And even I was like, it is grueling. It was a lot. We should collectively find out how many films we all watched. I know mine was a little over 500 this year, which was down from 700 features the year before. Wow. So then when I started looking at the numbers, I was like, I have no idea how I did this the last year without help, and I will never do that again. Because I think there's a responsibility on the part of the festival too, to make sure that the programming especially is not just coming from one voice, right? So we watched a ton of movies. We deliberated some together about some films, and I made sure to watch all of their choices as well along the way, just to get an idea. And there were notes that we shared along the way, film, and especially this year with moving to Playhouse Square, having basically a reduced footprint in terms of the number of slots that we can have for films. That's why we have 146 features as opposed to the last in-person CIFF was 217, I think, or something. We just don't have room for as many. So it was incredibly hard this year. And we had to say no to a ton of films that we really loved. And the deciding factor often comes down to, maybe it's a film that we love, but I don't know if my audience is going to love it, or especially in a year where, to be honest, a lot of us need a break. We need to escape. We need to laugh. We're known for playing some tough films sometimes at CIFF, and it was really also about trying to balance that out. So like Ivonne said, I think we did end up coming up with a really special program. It's the program I'm the most proud of, having been at the festival so far. So
cool. Did you notice there was an ebb or flow, or how did the pandemic affected obviously it affects the filmmaking process, but did you see that from a programming and film festival perspective? Was there like a dip in the number of submissions, or did that affect the overall volume, I guess, coming in?
Yeah, so no one stopped making movies. I can say that for sure. It's actually something that is really wonderful. I think that this community of filmmakers were able to persevere and still work through the pandemic, and especially when nobody was making money. Everyone's hurting right now still. So that was actually, a huge relief. And our submissions did drop in the last couple years when we were just virtual. Oh. And to me, that wasn't a sign of people not making movies. It was a sign of them wanting to have the full theatrical experience.
Sure.
Okay.
So I think that some filmmakers held off to try to wait it out. We all thought this was going to be a month at first, right? So I think they were trying to wait until they could have a theatrical experience, because that means so much more to filmmakers. And trust me, they are very excited to come back in person. We have a lot of filmmakers coming to CIFF this year. So we did see a drop, but I don't feel like that affected the programming for CIFF at all.
Right.
Like I said, we have to turn down some really excellent films every year just because we don't have the space as much. And, maybe CIFF at Playhouse Square will end up expanding, as we get settled in there, and over the years we'll grow back to what CIFF at Tower City was like. But, for now, it's also really nice to be able to know that the films that we have chosen, we believe in very much, and they are very strong films, and I'm proud to share them with Cleveland.
Very cool. And on that note, I want to ask Ivonne, Brett, and Neha about your process for watching the films for the festival in Cleveland. Are you someone, we'll start with Ivonne, who watches the whole thing and then makes notes? Do you stop along the way? What do you do?
Okay, thank you for this question, because I think it's going to enlighten people. People are always curious about what we do as a programmer when we are in the middle of the selection process. So as Mallory mentioned, we screen ton of films. Normally, I should say my rate is around four per day. Some days more than 4. So I do have a schedule for working properly. I'm gonna say, for me, what I'm looking for is first of all, I am looking for a voice. I'm trying to find a filmmaker and find a voice, a unique voice, but also some sense of concentrated emotion. because part of my work is really thinking on the audience. So probably when the festival is going on, if you don't find me, look for me into the theater, because I will be there. Yeah, I cannot, when I am programming, I cannot stop thinking about the audience, you know. When I'm watching a film, I take notes. I'm a kind of old-fashioned person, so I always have like a book, taking notes. And I have some notes like, in this part, I see the audience is gonna laugh. In this part, I'm gonna see people crying, you know. That's what I'm looking for most part of the time. Of course, there are many elements involved in the process, many elements to consider, such as, I should say, for me, formal elements, but also tone, authenticity on the voice, you know. For documentaries specifically, I look for films that I know the filmmaker does not come to this story as an outsider that came in a kind of parachute. Right. I want, you know, finding a filmmaker that is making an impact on the community, that really understand the issue, the topic he is portraying. But I also paying a lot of attention to the tone of the story, because for me, that makes like a huge difference. You can find both 2 or 3 films with the same theme, but the tone sometimes make the difference as well. The way that you choose for lens your film, you know, is one of my favorite parts. And as I said before, discovering new voices is one of my favorite moments in programming. So we have a new narrative competition, which is, I should say, one of my favorites. And don't miss the films that we programmed this year, because they are all are amazing. So it's like
outstanding. And for Brett, I'm wondering about your process too. How do you approach screening the films for the festival?
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to find my own voice and how I do it in my own process, since this is my first festival doing it officially outside of the screening team. And I think Neha and Ivonne and Mallory have their own processes. But I think I realized that I'm a very different spectator than I am a programmer. I think if I'm just going to the movies on my own, I don't watch trailers, I don't read synopses. I if there's a director, an actor, and some plot, I'm in. If I see one shot, I'm in. But with programming, I found that I did all the research I possibly could. So if the director was interviewed about it, or if they had past work, and I do want to shout out the screening team at CIFF, who wrote a lot of thorough and amazing comments about films that we have been watching, so I could read what other people had thought too, especially from the screeners that had been, and Mallory can speak to this too, have been volunteering and screening for years at this point. So I think I became a sponge as a programmer and just taking everything I could in, because I think context and background does matter to filmmaking outside of the film itself. And so I think I just really enjoyed that part of it, like trying to understand who the filmmakers were, why they made that film, who they are, who the producers are, composers, costume designers. I think that everyone matters. So I think I found that I like the research part of it more than I do as just if I'm going to the movies by myself or something.
Cool. And Neha?
I would say my process is kind of like a happy medium between Brett and Yvonne. So like I also like have like a notebook where I like write down notes, and like when it comes to like watching things in a theater, like on my own time, I may watch a trailer just depending, but I usually try not to go into a film with any preconceived notions. But like when programming, it's like I read like the director's statement, like I read like all their stuff. I look it up on like IMDb Pro. I look like at all these things, because I think all of that stuff is very important. I think like the intention for why someone made a film is very important. And I think for me, when I start screening things, I think headspace is also very important. Like if I'm in a really bad mood and then I have to watch films, I'm like, do I need to watch this film about how we're destroying the environment? Maybe not now. I'll try to watch that like tomorrow or something, because I think that because I feel like your attitude and when you watch it is going to affect like how you do it. And I don't want to have any kind of like biases or whatever when trying to screen films. I also think potential is really important. Like maybe the film isn't perfect, but but it's like you see the seeds of something that's super strong. Like you see good storytelling, you see good acting, you see good camera work, and you see like the passion and the voice behind this filmmaker. And to me, that's super important. So, like kind of what Yvonne said, just finding like a strong like narrative voice is super important, like a unique voice. Also along those lines, like films that showcase a different world, right? Like we don't know everything there is to know about everything that happens in the world. So when a film can take us on an adventure or show a side of an issue I may not know, I think that's super important. And like there was a film called Terrible Children, which is very personal, by a director named Shanti Thakur. And it deals with like a letter and her father. And it talks about the partition of India, which actually this year celebrates its 75th anniversary of like independence and everything. And I haven't really seen films that talk about partition from the people it actually affected. So to kind of have her tell this like really personal story and then talk about this, like, because all of that stuff is a part of like I was born in Pakistan, which was formed when India was separated. So like to kind of see that from like a South Asian perspective, I was like, wow, like I don't see this. Like all we had is like no offense to The Crown, I love The Crown, but like we have that and like Gandhi and all these things made by people who are British, right? But none about like our experiences. So that's something like I really connected with. I'm like, great, this is something that I feel like it's an issue that people don't really know about, and then they can kind of see it from a perspective of someone who is affected. So I just try to, any time a filmmaker can show us a different world or just like that really engrosses us in the subject, I think is super important. I also think just a plain good story, like, not every film needs to have like a explosion or like car chase to make it interesting, like there's such a great beauty in like telling a simple story. And I think if all those elements are there, like maybe it's predictable, like maybe we know what happens, but if the storytelling's good and we resonate with these characters, I think that's super important to me. I think anytime we can show a film where no matter what the subject is, if an audience member can relate to it and maybe like take things away from it, I think that's super important.
Very cool.
Well, Mallory, as we kind of start to wrap up here, I was curious your perspective on this, since there's a lot of new stuff going on this year, a lot of firsts going on. But one of the things that I always gravitate to, which I was great to see was still back, are like the sidebars and also some of the competitions, obviously hugely important for the filmmakers themselves. So any favorites or anything you really want to highlight from the sidebars or competitions this year?
Yeah, so there's a lot new about this year's festival, as you said. Actually, I think Mercy every year she used to compile a list of what's new this year to share with press and in meetings and things like that. And our joke this year is like, what's not new this year? And yeah, so I kept that in mind when thinking about this year. I mean, I do think in general within the film festival industry, there's a lot of talk right now about how you categorize festivals and the importance of not siloing films. So that is something that is very important to me. And in this process, I'm learning as much as I can about that. And I hope to reflect some of those things in our programming in the future. But so we did shift some of the sidebars a little bit. As you'll see, some of the names changed and some of the ways that we define them, and really tried to be deliberate in showcasing cultural programs this year. Plus, we have our first ever comedy sidebar, which is something people have always asked about in the past. And we've hesitated doing that for a number of reasons, because what a comedy is to one person might not be a comedy to somebody else. But I think this year, especially, like I said, I'm happy to help people navigate to the films that are going to make you feel good at this point in time. So some of the new ones that we have a new Indigenous cinema sidebar, which is just also indicative of the submissions and the programming that came to us. We have a lot of really great Indigenous films this year. I wanted to keep some of the programming categories similar to our audience, so they did feel like this is still CIFF and they know how to navigate the festival that way. Because even though we're at 146 feature films, it's still a lot of movies, right? So you need help navigating that. We do have another new sidebar this year called the Parability Cinema Sidebar, which is specifically showing stories about people with a wide range of abilities. And that's something that's really important to the festival, is to try to continue to be as accessible as possible. So that's an important focus of us. And then for the competition side, most of those have stayed the same this year. Some of them are endowed and funded. And so it's important for us to keep having those. And I also think one of the things that's really special about CIFF is that every film is in competition within our festival. That's not always the case at festivals, right? But it's very important for us to make sure that we are supporting filmmakers' work and doing so financially, especially now. So we have a lot of competitions, and we'll be giving away a significant amount of cash prizes this year. Again, in terms of my favorite, I have to side with Ivonne. Our new direction competition has always been my favorite at CIFF. I mean, it's now I think like 6 or 7 years old, and we started it about halfway into my career at CIFF. And it was mostly because these are the type of films, I mean, they're not only debut features from these directors for narratives, but there's something more to that because a lot of our filmmakers at CIFF are first-time directors, which is really important. But these films in particular do showcase new voices and always end up kind of pushing the limits and boundaries of what traditional filmmaking is. And I love calling out these voices at the beginning because it's been really fascinating to see how all these directors have advanced and what their next films are like. And those were the films that I often found myself coming back after being at home and watching, 5 to 9 movies a day during selection time, coming in and being like, okay, I have to talk about this movie, right? Those are the ones that you always talk about. So that's one that's always dear to my heart. But I love all the movies in our festival, right? I can't pick my babies.
Very cool. Oh, Mallory, Brett, Neha, Ivonne, it's such a pleasure talking with you all. And I'm even more excited about the festival coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And you may have noticed that we didn't mention any specific film recommendations from you all. And that's because you each did a great job of showcasing those online. We invite our audience to go to the CIFF YouTube channel and look for CIFF 46 Programmers Picks from CIFF Artistic Director Mallory Martin, as well as programmers Neha Aziz, Ivonne Cotorruelo, and Brett Reiter. You'll also find out what's new from the Shorts guy, Paul Sloop. In the meantime, thanks to all our guests today. And CIFF 46 begins on March 30th and continues through April 9th at Playhouse Square. The online festival, CIFF 46 Streams, will take place April 10th through April 17th. For more details, go to the CIFF website, clevelandfilm.org. I'm Dee Perry.
And I'm Aaron Spears.
We want to thank our sponsor for this podcast, Wayside Furniture, keeping it local since 1937. And thank you for listening to CIFF Speaks.